Okay, guys, so as I mentioned, I wanted to just talk today about the final few assessments. This is the last week of the course, if you can believe it. The 6-week version just really flies by. So we are already at the point where you need to be thinking about your final paper and presentations and all that. So here is the calendar of the syllabus, and here in the last week, we can see that there are a few major assignments coming up, but a fair amount of them are mostly the culmination of some things that you've been working on with regards to your project. So the main things, as you can see, is going to be data analysis. I would say about half of you have done this already. I know some of you are trying to get your sample size up to where you want it to be. As long as you get data analysis done by some point, I would say midweek, you should be left with enough time to work on your final assignments. But for those of you who have already done your data analysis, had that meeting with me, at this point, you can submit that data set and syntax file to Canvas. You'll get credit just for submitting those files. And then from there, you're gonna work on your final write-ups of your project. So this is going to be your final presentation and your final paper. I'll get to the exam after I talk about these project components. So I'm going to start with the presentation. Any of you who have taken 293 with me, I decided to basically have the exact same presentation format. I know a lot of the time in 294 you present in a poster. A poster presentation would just be sort of one static slide where all of the content of the presentation is given at the same time on a single poster. But I figure you all have, for the most part, been through my 293 and put together a PowerPoint presentation and gotten some practice at that presentation style. So I figured we could just keep that because it's easy to do sort of something in the same vein as what you've done before. So if you've taken 293 with me before, it's really just the same thing. You're just going to be presenting the content of the experiment that you did this semester. So for anyone who is in a project group this semester, you do have the option, if you want to present individually or to present with your group members. Just make me aware of your preferences, but it's really up to you. You can do whatever sort of works for you. If you've had trouble coordinating a time to meet with your group members, that's all completely fine. If you do want to present as an individual, you will be responsible for the full presentation. But if you're presenting with your group mates, just be in touch with them about how and when you would like to present. In terms of how you can actually deliver your presentation, you have lots of different options. I've actually set aside 6 meetings that I'm going to call class-wide Zoom meetings, just meaning I'll be posting the Zoom links to Canvas so that anyone in the class could join. So this hopefully gives you lots of different times to choose from. And ideally, we could get people signing up for the same Zoom meeting so you could have a quote-unquote audience. That's always a little bit more fun than just having it be an audience of one. So there's lots of different Zoom options that I've set aside that we definitely will be able to have Zoom meetings. If none of those 6 aforementioned times work, you can just coordinate a separate Zoom meeting with me. You can sign up on the same doodle poll, but I would encourage you to also be in touch with me over email just to verify and confirm whatever separate time you would want to meet with me over Zoom. Additionally, if you don't feel like giving a live presentation, you can just record yourself. Really, any number of options would work for this. You can record yourself on Zoom. You can use a screen recording software like OBS Studio, which is what I use to record lectures. As long as I can hear you and see your presentation, that's fine. You don't need to record your face. Trust me, I know that's not always what we want to do when we're recording ourselves. So feel free to just do a voiceover. And really, as long as you arrange to deliver your presentation to me at some point this week, that's completely fine. In terms of the actual content of the presentation, again, if you've been through my 293, it's really the same. Even with the introduction being newly added to the paper. You guys did still introduce your topic in your presentations before. That same manner of introduction will work for this presentation. Just sort of generally introducing the topic and why you were interested in it is perfectly fine. You don't need to go through your in-depth literature review for the presentation. You can certainly beef up the introduction part of your presentation if you want, but that's not necessary. You just need to make sure you're introducing your topic and sort of describing why it's interesting to you. Okay, so like I said, it's going to be a PowerPoint presentation as opposed to a poster presentation. So this is the exact same format for the presentations that you would have done in prior to 93. And then my typical advice of once you create your PowerPoint, just make sure that you practice, you time yourself, and you make sure that you're sort of familiar with the content of what you will be talking about. Got my rubric here. The same as before, because really I'll be looking for the same things. Obviously, you're just talking about a slightly different project, slightly different analyses, but you can approach the creation of your project very, very similarly. Like I said, I'll be having some class-wide Zoom meetings. I've got a Google document set up, and if you want to sign up to do a Zoom meeting, you can just hop onto that Google document and sign up for a time. If you're scheduling an individual meeting and you type that meeting request into this Google document, I'll make sure to keep an eye on it. If there's any times that don't work with me, I'll just be in touch with you to try and re-coordinate. For the pre-recording, you can just really send the video of this to me at any point over week 6 in whatever format works for me. If you have difficulty sending a large file, which most videos do take up quite a bit of file, it's like a quite large file that can be hard to send over email, you can always upload it to YouTube and then just send me the link. Happy to do that as well. And yeah, as long as you get that to me some point this week, you're really good to go. If you do have specific preferences, go ahead and fill out the Google document or the Google form that I have here, letting me know if you're going to be breaking out from your group, if you're going to be presenting on Zoom, pre-recording. If you let me know your preferences by tomorrow, I'll have enough time to sort of prepare. So at this point, I'll pause and see if anyone has questions on the presentation. Okay, like I said, I'll also stick around to take questions at the end as well. So if there are no questions at this time, I will hop over to talk a little bit more about the final paper. Okay, so the instructions for the final paper are all available on Canvas, same with the instructions for the presentation. And sort of the same stuff to look for in these instructions, details about due dates, etc. One thing that's slightly different, most of you are aware at this point that Miami did lay me off due to coronavirus. So if you are not able to get me assignments by the time I'm no longer working for Miami, this might put a sort of kink in your ability to submit outstanding assignments and get a grade change from incomplete to being graded for your work. At this point, if you do want to take an incomplete in the class because you're having trouble getting the paper done or any other major assignments done, once I'm no longer here, I believe it will rest in Alan McConnell's hands. So I'll work on being in touch with Alan McConnell to figure out if there's any provisions I need to make sure that anyone with an incomplete can still turn work in. But do know if you are hoping to get an extension on some of these major assignments, normally in the past I would be happy to do so and take those assignments into the fall. At this point, it just might be a little bit more tricky. So all of that is to say, try and get these assignments to me in time for me to grade them, because otherwise I don't exactly know how Alan McConnell would be able to take over those things for me. Most of the same details are in effect. APA format, of course, Turnitin is in effect. I've got in-depth guidelines to explain what should go into the new sections of the paper. You've already written your literature review. I've had a chance to look at your lit reviews. I'm still writing up the feedback for most of you, but most of you did quite well in the lit review. Main feedback I had were things like some nitpicky APA formatting things, removing sort of opinion-based or subjective language and wording, and some places where extra citations might have been helpful. But for the most part, most of your lit reviews are pretty much in good shape. And you're going to tack on your methods section, analyses and results, and discussion. So Methods, those of you from 293, it's your methods section where you just described the materials you used. The main difference here is you're going to be describing your independent variable and the manipulation you used, but your description of your DV and the rest of your survey is the same because you did very similar kind of a survey. Analyses and results, make sure that you have some key things there. Namely, you're going to want at least a factorial ANOVA analysis. And then, did I not change that? And then the discussion where you basically wrap up and do a postmortem saying, this is what was significant, this is what wasn't, and sort of interpret why you think you got the results you did. Page count, so that you have a target page count, subsections of the various paper major sections, the full paper sections, little things like you need a title page, you need your references section, you need a graphic in your methods, or your results section, a rubric, and some overall tips and tricks. So this instructions document is meant to be sort of as in-depth as possible, a sort of a one-stop shop where you can figure out and answer a lot of the questions you have about the paper, but of course I'm happy to take more meetings to talk about any questions that you have on your paper as well. But that instructions document does post a lot of the information that you will need to complete that final paper. So before I talk a little bit about the final exam, which should hopefully wrap up this meeting, does anyone have any questions right now on the final paper? Okay, so now let's just talk briefly about the final exam. So this is going to be the exact same structure as the exam you already had earlier in the semester. So some multiple choice, some fill in the blank, and some essay questions. By and large, I was happy with the performance that I saw on the first exam. So if you're happy with your performance on the first exam, your study methods, you can probably carry over to the second exam. It's not going to be any harder. I will be posting a review guide like I had for the first section of the conceptual study questions. Again, there's no computations or statistics on the exam, so you shouldn't need any practice problems. I do need to catch up on the last few of my lecture videos. Lecture slides have all been posted, but those videos should be made available to you by Wednesday at the latest. There's, I think, 3 that I need to catch up on. And there was one chapter that I elected to remove from this unit just because I thought I didn't feel like doing it anymore. So I decided to delete it. This chapter on quantity experiments in small n, I decided that it just wasn't worth our time to bother with that. I know a lot of you have worked so hard on your project that it's been sort of hard to stay on top of these lecture materials, and trust me, I get it. It's hard for me to stay on top of them as well. So I figure one less thing you have to study for on the final exam. So what will be represented on this exam is going to be correlational research, experimental design, experimental validity, factorial design, and replications. Like I said, I'll be catching up on those last few videos within the next couple days and posting the review guide as well. The exam will be made available Friday afternoon, and you will have until Monday night to complete it. As with the previous exam, you'll have a few hours once you start the exam to complete it. So at this point, I think that's basically everything I need to go over, cover data analysis, final presentation, final paper, and final exam. And those assignments should round out all that you need to complete for this course. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and just hang out. If any of you have questions, I'm happy to take those. But that basically does it for what I wanted to cover